I'm not going to use a grain filling product on the soundboard because Hue & Pine doesn't really need it. It's got very dense, very fine grain. On the rest of the guitar, I kind of have to decide whether to go for a, mirror smooth finish, and the utter hard gloss mirror is not quite in fitting with either my vision or my skill set, or a more rustic furniture-ish finish. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, because my method calls for finishing the soundboard first, and the reason for that will become clear later. Scotch Magic Tape has the advantage in that you can draw on it with a pencil. On the other hand, it's quite brittle when it comes to remove, but it's better than any of the alternatives that I've tried. Ideally, I want no overlaps and no gaps, but you can't always get what you want. A piece of paper makes getting the removal started oh so much easier. Hue & Pine is very soft and I can easily score it with a sharp pencil, so I'm drawing very gently, but I need to be able to see the line later. For fairly obvious reasons, this is one of the most delicate parts of the entire operation. Sometimes the grain wants to turn the knife when your hand doesn't want to turn the knife. Now I need to peel away all the tape on the outside of the mask. And Scotch tape is quite brittle, which means that little bits remain that need to be lifted. And a very, very sharp chisel can help you do that, but there is an obvious risk there as well. And you might say, well, just use your fingernail, but this is Hue & Pine. Pressing down with your fingernail makes an impression, and it's not a good impression. Those are pretty clean masks, with the exception of these bridge pin holes, so we'll just put another piece of tape over those. The aim of the game is being able to just glide over the entire surface. If the bridge and the fingerboard were there, we would have to go around all of those curly little pointy little edges, and that's real hard. First phase of French polishing is what I call seal, flood fill and rapid build. But I also call it a game of grain feature or inadequate sanding, because it reveals things that may not have been obvious earlier. Since this is Hobart in May, the other game that we start playing is Baby It's Cold Outside. The shellac has indeed revealed a couple of spots that need a bit of extra sanding. They looked perfect in the white. So I'm going to take this outside and give it about half an hour to allow this shellac to harden and then do a bit of extra sanding. I ended up sanding both of them. There were lines that had absorbed more shellac than the surrounding areas. Some of them I'm pretty sure were grain features, and others were almost certainly drum sander scratches. I didn't take off the two masks, so that may leave a slight antique appearance in the final product. We shall have to wait and see. But now I've got to start all over again, doing the sealing and the flood filling. The characteristics of this first phase is to use a very, very wet rubber, lots of shellac, and no oil at all. In fact, I use a rubber that has not seen any oil ever in its life. But eventually, the blotchiness and the grippiness will tell us that it is time to switch over to regular French polishing, the so-called build phase, where we use a separate rubber and we don't charge it with nearly as much shellac, and we use a small amount of oil. Not yet. Here we are with the regular French polishing rubber. A little bit of oil. It glides in a way that the previous one wasn't, and it's got these little ghostly tails that follow me around because the alcohol evaporates almost immediately, which means that the tail kind of follows you and disappears. By looking at that tail, I can tell what I need to do. I think at the moment there's a little bit too much oil, because I'm getting the tail but it's not kind of moving like a ghost. Use the mouse's tail to clean off some of that oil. Now you can see why I like to French polish the soundboard before gluing on the bridge and the fingerboard.
Long strokes for the win, baby.
It's good to have two going at the same time, because giving them a little rest from time to time means that I can do a lot more work before having to stop.
In this short, nausea-inducing clip, you can see the vapour trail following the rubber as the alcohol evaporates from the ultra-thin layer of shellac that has just been laid down.
We're getting towards the end of what we can achieve in a single session. The weather is not very warm. Even this room with the heater on is not all that warm. So the finish that's building up is a little bit soft, and it stays tacky for a little bit longer, which means if we keep piling it on, we're going to end up making a mess. I'm not sure whether the camera will pick this up, but the grain is starting to reveal itself. It's going to look quite pretty. And the other one looks even better. It's the next morning, so overnight what we put down yesterday has had a chance to get a little bit harder. I'm going to take some 1200 sandpaper and some oil and get rid of some of the bumps that we managed to put in yesterday. Some of them would have been from little bits of fluff that have been pulled out of the rubber. Some of them would have been from little flecks of shellac that dislodged from the mask and deposited, and others are from areas where my rubber was too wet and it laid down a bit of a streak, which is a bit of a darker colour. That operation leaves areas that look matte and areas that look a bit scratched. And the good news is that just regular French polishing will take care of that if we are patient. And if I've learned anything, it's that trying to fix problems by anything other than patience generally introduces more problems. After a few minutes of that, with good vapour trails happening, I can't see any of those scratched areas, so that's a success, and I'll move on to the other guitar. While waiting for the shellac to harden in between sessions, I carved myself a couple of truss rod covers. They've got little indentations in the back where they will fit over the truss rod nut, like so. This is the other Huon Pine soundboard that I've built. I finished this one about 5 months ago. Huon Pine under shellac deepens in colour over time. I'm going to press on over the next week, adding more shellac, sanding out any bumps and irregularities, so it should be looking quite nice when it's time for the next steps.